A 12-year-old boy with leg braces stood at the bottom of the rocky steps in Philadelphia, facing the impossible. Tourists stared. Phones recorded. And then he pointed to the top and challenged Sylvester Stallone to race him. Some laughed. Others said it was dangerous. Even his doctor tried to stop him. But what happened next, at step 71, left everyone in total silence. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, subscribe to the channel. Because tomorrow at 6 p.m. we have another powerful story coming your way. And believe me, you won't want to miss what's next. He was only 12. But when Ethan pointed at those stone steps, with that trembling hand and fire in his eyes, the whole city of Philadelphia seemed to hold its breath. The January wind sliced through his coat, but he didn't flinch. He stood at the base of the iconic rocky steps, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, towering above like a mountain, built just for giants. His right leg dragged slightly behind the left, the metal brace squeaking every few steps. The cold made his fingers stiff, but he clenched them into fists. "I want to run them," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. With him. That him wasn't just anyone. That him was Sylvester Stallone, the man who had run up those steps half a century ago in a film that turned underdogs into legends. Ethan had watched Rocky so many times he could quote every line, but quoting was easy. Running wasn't. He had been born with partial paralysis, a perinatal stroke, silent, unexpected, irreversible. Doctors called it hemiparesis, but to Ethan it meant one thing: everything hurts, always. But pain was normal. What wasn't normal was what he was about to do. There were maybe 200 people scattered around the plaza that morning. Joggers, tourists, parents with strollers, a few men in Eagles jerseys shouting about the playoffs. Ethan ignored them all. His gaze locked on the top of those 72 stone steps. The same ones Rocky climbed with that raw music pounding in the background. His mom, Rebecca, stood a few feet away with her coat pulled tight, eyes glistening. She knew what today was. She had begged him to reconsider. He could fall. He could injure his back again. He could... But there were no coulds in Ethan's mind. There was only now, and a single message he had posted to social media the night before. "If anyone knows Mr. Stallone, tell him I'll be waiting at the Rocky Steps at 9 a.m. I'll race him. One time. One dream." It was a long shot, but sometimes those are the only shots worth. He started stretching, awkwardly, stiffly. The cold wasn't helping. Every motion looked more like effort than grace. People started to notice. A few pulled out their phones, others whispered. And then someone tapped his shoulder. Ethan turned slowly, unsure if it was a tourist or a security guard asking him to move. But it wasn't. It was him, Sylvester Stallone, in a thick gray hoodie, black sweatpants, and those unmistakable eyes that had once stared down Apollo Creed. Older now, slower, but somehow even more powerful because of it. "You the kid that challenged me?" he asked, voice low, gritty, amused. Ethan nodded. His knees suddenly felt like glass. "You sure about this?" Stallone added, studying the boy. Ethan swallowed hard. "I've waited my whole life for this." Stallone looked at the steps, then back at Ethan, then smiled. "Well then," he said, "let's see what you've got, champ." But just as they turned toward the stairs, camera phones rising, gasps echoing, a man in a black coat stepped forward, holding out his hand. "Wait, he can't do this," the man said firmly. "I'm his doctor." "Was team." The crowd went silent. Ethan's face fell. His mom stepped forward in panic. "And Stallone?" He didn't move a muscle, because what the doctor said next changed everything. "I'm his doctor," the man repeated, louder now. "And if he climbs those stairs, he could lose function in his right side, permanently." The words cracked through the air like thunder. Ethan froze. Rebecca clutched her son's arm, her face crumbling. Stallone turned his head slightly, the wind stirring the edges of his hoodie, but his eyes stayed locked on the boy. Dr. Halverson had been with Ethan since he was 5. The man had watched this kid fall 100 times and get back up 101. But this wasn't just ambition anymore. This was risk. Real risk. "Ethan," the doctor said more gently now, "you've already won, son, just standing here, with him. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Cheer, but Ethan's voice came back like a whisper on fire. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to feel alive." Rebecca's lips trembled. Stallone exhaled, deep, slow, like he understood that line more than anyone else possibly could. The crowd stood in still silence. Then Stallone looked at the doctor. "You do what you gotta do, Doc. But this kid, he's already climbed higher than most grown men I've ever known." And Ethan turned, face flushed with fear and resolve, toward his mother. "Please, let me try." Rebecca's heart shattered in 100 directions at once. Her instinct screamed no, but her soul whispered yes. Because when your child finally chooses to believe in himself, you don't take that away. She nodded slowly, and the steps became a battlefield. Over the next 3 days, Ethan trained. Not physically, he couldn't afford another fall, but mentally. He walked the bottom steps over and over. Coach Davis, his PE teacher from school, showed up out of nowhere, having seen the viral post. He brought him gloves for grip, a timer, and the same cheesy whistle he always wore around his neck. "You don't climb those stairs with muscles. You climb them with heart," Davis said, "and yours, strongest I've ever seen." Meanwhile, Stallone stayed in the city. He called it unfinished business. The media exploded. CNN ran the story under Rocky returns, but this time for a boy named Ethan. Twitter flooded with Dr. Run Ethan Run. People mailed letters. One old lady from Iowa sent him a box of cookies with a note, "For strength, and because you remind me of my grandson." But not everything was praise. There were skeptics, pundits, pediatric specialists on morning shows shaking their heads. We must protect children from their own dreams sometimes, especially when those dreams can cause irreparable damage. Ethan saw it all, and still every night he stood at the bottom of the steps, silent, focused, talking to the stone with his eyes, imagining the weight of each one under his foot, imagining the medal, the victory, or the fall. And that fear grew louder each night, especially when the pain started flaring up again, nerve pain, deep and electric, crawling through his hip and spine like a warning. Coach Davis noticed. "You okay, champ?" Ethan nodded, lied. But that night he cried himself to sleep. Because what if they were all right? What if this was just a fantasy wrapped in a movie scene? That's when Stallone called. No cameras, no press, just his voice on the phone. "You ever seen the scene where Rocky loses?" he asked. Ethan sniffled. "Yeah, against Apollo." "Right, but you remember what he said after?" "I just wanted to go the distance," Ethan murmured. Stallone paused. "Exactly. So you don't have to beat anything, kid. You just gotta go the distance, one step at a time." The next morning something shifted in Ethan's eyes. A quietness, like he had stopped fighting and started accepting, but not giving up, no. Accepting the fear, carrying it. Because sometimes carrying it is how you climb. On the day of the run, the entire plaza was packed. News vans, drone cameras, school buses filled with kids waving signs. And on the steps, standing at the top, was a surprise Ethan hadn't expected. A small brass plaque, freshly mounted. It read, "To the fighters who never give up, this one's for you." He blinked hard, looked at Stallone, then at his mom, then up. And that's when he whispered something no one else heard. "Even if I fall, let it be forward." He placed his foot on the first step. Then everything went silent, and he ran. The crowd didn't cheer immediately. They watched, held their breath. The sound of Ethan's braces hitting the first few steps echoed like metal drums in the morning stillness. His left leg moved with force, his right followed with effort. It wasn't fast, it wasn't clean, but it was movement, and it was his. Stallone jogged beside him, not in front, not behind, matching his pace, not leading, not guiding, just there. A living shadow of encouragement. By the 10th step, Ethan's breathing was already ragged. The incline burned through his thigh. His palms trembled inside his gloves, but he didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the next step, and only the next. Then something happened. A tremor just below his right knee. Not pain, not fatigue. Something worse, numbness. Ethan's leg locked mid-step, his body twisted awkwardly as his center of gravity shifted. The crowd gasped. Stallone reached out, but Ethan waved him off. "I got it," he grunted. And he did, barely. He fell forward, catching the step with his hands, gritting his teeth so hard his gums bled. Then, with trembling elbows, he pushed himself back to his feet and climbed. One more step. The crowd roared. Rebecca pressed her hands to her mouth. Coach Davis wiped his eyes. But by the 40th step, Ethan was limping heavily. His body was now in open rebellion. The nerves had stopped communicating cleanly. Every muscle screamed. His heart pounded like it was trying to escape his chest. He stopped. Midway, put his hands on his knees, looked up, still 32 more to go. That's when he whispered, "I can't." Stallone stood beside him, breathing hard but steady. "You don't have to finish like Rocky," he said quietly. "You can finish like..." Ethan closed his eyes, and suddenly his mind wasn't on the stairs anymore. It was in a hospital room, age 5, learning to walk again, the cruel laughter of other kids echoing down a hallway, the shame, the endless hours of physical therapy. The nights he cried in silence so his mom wouldn't hear. And then the scene changed. He saw himself on a couch, watching Rocky II, Stallone on the screen, arms lifted in triumph. And Ethan whispered to the screen, "One day." Back in the present, he opened his eyes. And he climbed. Again, each step a war. Blood began to show in his sock from the friction inside the brace. He stumbled, recovered, fell again. This time, Stallone did not reach for him. He stood still, silent, watching, letting the boy become the man. And then, at the 65th step, it happened. Ethan collapsed, hard. Head hit the concrete. The crowd screamed. Rebecca pushed through the barricades. Medics ran forward, but before anyone could reach him, he rolled to his side, onto his back, and laughed, blood on his forehead, tears in his eyes, a laugh full of pain, disbelief, and joy. Then he looked up and saw something no one else had. A single step, etched by decades of tourists and joggers, had a faded inscription carved into the corner. It read, "Going the distance matters more than speed." He touched the letters with his fingers. Then, somehow, he pushed himself up again. Step 66, step 67. Each one now felt like lifting a mountain with his soul. Then came step 71. And then he stopped. One step from the top, the city behind him. The crowd silent. Stallone beside him, tears on his cheeks. Ethan turned. Faced the people, faced the cameras, faced the future, and instead of taking the last step, he sat right there and whispered, "This is far enough." The crowd stood frozen, then exploded into applause, not because he made it to the top, but because he knew where his summit truly was. Stallone sat beside him, took off his own glove, and placed something into Ethan's hand, his original Rocky pendant, the one worn in the very first film, a silver boxing glove dulled by time. "I carried this when I needed to believe," he said. "Now it's yours." Ethan held it tight. The cold metal felt like fire in his palm. And below them, the crowd chanted a new name. Not Rocky, but Ethan. They stayed there, Ethan and Stallone, on that 71st step, long after the clapping had faded. The air was different up there, not just colder, quieter. The kind of quiet that only comes after you've emptied yourself out. Ethan's hands were scraped, his forehead still bleeding slightly, his sock soaked in blood, and he'd never felt more alive. His mom finally reached him, fell to her knees, and wrapped her arms around his trembling frame. She didn't say a word, didn't need to. Her tears said everything: pride, relief, and something deeper: respect. Not the kind a parent gives automatically, but the kind earned by watching your child become something more than just brave. A warrior. They helped him down gently. One step at a time, the very crowd that once doubted him now parted like waves in reverence. Journalists lowered their cameras. Some just watched with hands over their hearts. Later that night, a local reporter asked Ethan one question: "Why didn't you take the fight?" Ethan blinked, then smiled. "Because I didn't come here to reach your finish line. I came to reach mine." The video went viral. Millions watched it. Millions more shared it. But it wasn't the views or the headlines that changed anything. It was the conversations. Parents telling their kids they believed in them. Veterans walking again. Teenagers in hospital beds saying, "If he can, maybe I can too." Stallone didn't return to Hollywood right away. He stayed in Philly for another week, visited Ethan twice more, once at home where they watched Rocky III together. Ethan wore the pendant. Stallone brought pizza. They didn't talk much about the run, just movies, favorite scenes. Then, before leaving, Stallone handed him a small box. Inside was a framed photo of the two of them, on the 71st step, laughing. Below the photo, an inscription. He was only 12, but something in his eyes told me he had already climbed farther than I ever did. The quote went on the wall next to Ethan's bed. That spring, Ethan began writing, journaling, speaking. He visited schools, talked to other kids with disabilities. He told them about pain, about failure, but mostly about how it feels when you no longer wait to be chosen and choose yourself. A year later, the city of Philadelphia unveiled a second plaque right next to the first. It read, "Ethan Miller for those who climb in silence." It was bronze, unpolished, like the boy who inspired it. Scratched, imperfect, but radiant in its honesty. The plaque became a place people visited. They'd leave notes, shoes, little boxing gloves. One letter read, "My daughter walked today. She saw you do it. Thank you." And yet, Ethan didn't seek fame. He still walked with a brace, still struggled on rainy days, still had therapy appointments every Tuesday. But there was a light behind his eyes now, a quiet knowing that he had climbed something no camera could. Years later, someone asked, "Would you do it all over?" And as he turned to walk away from the camera that day, now older, hair brushing his collar, he paused, looked back. He was only 12, but when he pointed at those steps, with fire in his eyes, the world stood still. Thanks for watching, my friend. And remember, sometimes the most powerful step you'll ever take is the one where you decide you've gone far. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and never forget, you don't have to finish someone else's race. Just finish your own, with courage. See you in the next story.